"You don't belong here anymore," my son said, gesturing around the kitchen where I'd made him breakfast every school morning for 18 years. David delivered those words with the casual cruelty of someone who'd forgotten that this house, this neighborhood, this life he was dismissing had been built by the man sitting across from him. The phrase hit me like a physical blow, not just for its harshness, but for its complete disregard of everything this place meant to me and Martha's memory. If you've ever been told you're no longer welcome in the life you built with your own hands, if you've ever had your children treat your home like a burden they need to manage, settle in for this story. Sometimes the people who try to relocate us are about to learn exactly where we really belong, and it's not where they think. And if you believe that dignity and independence don't expire at a certain age, hit subscribe on Grandpa's Stories. This tale is about showing ungrateful children that underestimating their parents can lead to surprises they never saw coming. The words echoed in my head as I looked around the kitchen. Martha and I had renovated in 1987, the same year David graduated high school and left for college. These weren't just walls and cabinets to me. They were memories of birthday celebrations, holiday gatherings, and quiet morning coffees with the woman I'd loved for 47 years. But to David, they were apparently obstacles to his vision of appropriate senior living, inconvenient reminders that his 71-year-old father wasn't following the script he'd written for my golden years. Carol, my daughter-in-law, nodded in agreement with her husband's assessment, though she had the grace to look uncomfortable about the delivery. "Frank, we're just concerned about you rattling around in this big house all alone. It's too much maintenance, too much space for one person." Her concerns sounded rehearsed, like they'd practiced this conversation in their car before coming over for our weekly Sunday breakfast. The irony wasn't lost on me. This big house they were so concerned about was actually a modest 3-bedroom ranch that Martha and I had saved for years to afford. The too much maintenance consisted of tasks I'd been handling competently for 35 years, from the landscaping business I'd built from nothing to the home repairs that kept everything in perfect condition. The rattling around they mentioned was my peaceful enjoyment of space I'd earned through decades of hard work. David continued his intervention with the confident tone he used for sales presentations at his office. "Dad, we've found some great senior communities where you'd have people your own age, activities designed for your interests, and medical support nearby if you need it." Each benefit he listed sounded more like a limitation being imposed than a gift being offered. People my own age, as if I was too old for intergenerational relationships. Activities designed for my interests, as if he knew what those were. Medical support, as if I was one fall away from helplessness. What they didn't understand, what they'd never bothered to ask about, was that this house wasn't just where I lived. It was where Martha and I had built our life together, where every room held stories they'd never heard, where her presence still felt real enough to comfort me through the hardest nights of grief. Moving me to a sterile senior community wasn't about my well-being. It was about their comfort with aging, their need to categorize and contain the inconvenient reality of their father's continued independence. The breakfast that should have been a pleasant family tradition had become an ambush designed to wear down my resistance to their plans. But as I listened to their carefully coordinated concerns and solutions, I realized they'd made one crucial miscalculation. They assumed that just because I was 71 and widowed, I'd lost the ability to make my own decisions about where and how to live. They were about to learn exactly how wrong that assumption was. This house had never been just a structure to Martha and me. It was the foundation of everything we'd built together. We'd bought it in 1988 when David was starting college, finally able to afford the modest ranch-style home we'd dreamed about during our apartment years. Martha had walked through every room that first day, planning where our furniture would go, which bedroom would be the guest room for visiting grandchildren we hoped to have someday, how the backyard could become the garden sanctuary she'd always wanted. I'd spent weekends for 2 years, renovating every inch of that house with my own hands, learning plumbing and electrical work to save money, installing the hardwood floors Martha had admired in magazines, building the custom cabinets that made our small kitchen feel spacious and welcoming. Each nail I drove, each board I measured, each tile I placed was an investment in our future together, a testament to the life we were creating through love and determination. The backyard became Martha's masterpiece over the following decades. She'd researched native plants, designed flower beds that bloomed in succession throughout the growing season, and created the vegetable garden that supplied our kitchen with fresh produce every summer. Her roses won prizes at the county fair 3 years running, and neighbors would stop by just to admire the beauty she'd cultivated through patience and care. That garden wasn't just landscaping. It was Martha's legacy, growing more beautiful each year, even after she was gone. David had brought his girlfriends to this house throughout his 20s, proud to show off his parents' accomplishments and the warm welcome they'd always receive at our dinner table. Carol had been one of those girlfriends, nervous about meeting us for the first time, relaxing into laughter as Martha shared embarrassing stories about David's childhood. This was where they'd announced their engagement, where we'd celebrated his promotion to sales manager, where Martha had helped Carol plan their wedding reception. The grandchildren's visits had filled these rooms with the kind of joy that made all our years of work worthwhile. Ryan learning to ride his bike on the smooth driveway I'd poured myself. Emma helping Martha bake cookies in the kitchen, where 3 generations of family recipes had been passed down through stories and shared experiences. Holiday mornings when the living room overflowed with wrapping paper and laughter, when the dining room table extended to accommodate everyone's favorite dishes. After Martha's diagnosis, this house became our sanctuary during the hardest months of our marriage. The bedroom where I'd cared for her during sleepless nights, reading aloud from her favorite novels when the pain was too intense for sleep. The living room where we'd watched old movies together, her head on my shoulder, both of us pretending we had all the time in the world. The front porch where she'd sat, wrapped in blankets, watching birds at the feeders I'd installed to bring nature closer during her final spring. Now 18 months after losing her, I was being told this place of memories and meaning was inappropriate for my continued habitation. The house that had sheltered our love story, witnessed our struggles and triumphs, and provided the backdrop for every significant family moment was suddenly too big, too much, too impractical for a man who'd maintained it perfectly for 35 years. The casual dismissal of everything this place represented felt like a betrayal not just of me, but of Martha's memory and the life we'd built together. What started as occasional suggestions about considering my options had escalated into a full-scale campaign to relocate me against my wishes. David's visits became more frequent and focused, each conversation somehow steering toward concerns about my living situation, my isolation, my ability to handle home maintenance that I'd been managing competently for decades. The pressure was subtle but relentless, designed to wear down my resistance through repetition and manufactured worry. Carol had joined the effort with research about senior living communities, bringing colorful brochures that made assisted living look like permanent vacation resorts. She'd highlight amenities like organized activities, social opportunities, and maintenance-free living as if my current life was somehow deficient in these areas. "Look at this craft room, Frank. You could take up woodworking again," she'd say, apparently forgetting that I had a fully equipped workshop in my garage where I'd been doing woodworking for 40 years. The financial arguments were the most insulting, delivered with concern about my retirement security, that ignored decades of careful planning and successful business ownership. "Dad, think about how much money you're spending on utilities and maintenance for a house this size. You could have so much more disposable income in a smaller place." They seemed to have forgotten that my landscaping business had been quite successful, and that Martha and I had been careful savers and investors throughout our working years. Betty, my next-door neighbor of 30 years, had become an unwilling witness to their pressure campaign. She'd seen David and Carol arriving with real estate flyers, measuring tapes and calculators, clearly planning my relocation without my consent or enthusiasm. "Frank," she'd told me over coffee one morning, "they're treating you like you're incompetent, and you're the most capable man I know. Don't let them railroad you into something you don't want." The manipulation became more obvious as weeks passed. David would arrive with stories about elderly neighbors who'd fallen, had medical emergencies, or struggled with home maintenance, each anecdote designed to make me question my safety and independence. "Mr. Peterson from your street had a heart attack last week, and nobody found him for 6 hours. In a senior community, there would have been immediate help available." The fear-mongering was transparent but persistent. The most hurtful aspect was their assumption that I couldn't make rational decisions about my own life. Every preference I expressed was treated as stubborn resistance rather than informed choice. When I explained that I enjoyed the quiet of my own home, they heard isolation that needed to be fixed. When I mentioned my satisfaction with my current routine, they heard monotony that required intervention. My contentment was reframed as denial, my independence as dangerous stubbornness. The breaking point was approaching, and I could feel it building with each conversation that treated me like a problem to be solved rather than a person to be respected. They'd made their position clear. I was too old to live independently, too isolated for my own good, and too attached to a house that no longer served my real needs. They were about to learn that their assumptions about my capabilities and resources were as wrong as their assessment of my willingness to be managed like a child. The conversation that Sunday morning started like all the others, with David and Carol arriving for breakfast, armed with new arguments about why I needed to abandon the home Martha and I had loved. But something felt different this time, more urgent, more determined, as if they decided to move from persuasion to ultimatum. Carol set another stack of senior living brochures on my kitchen table while David began his most direct assault yet on my living situation. "Dad, we need to talk seriously about this house situation. You're being unrealistic about your needs and capabilities." His tone had shifted from concerned son to frustrated manager, dealing with an uncooperative employee. "This neighborhood has changed. The house is too big. And frankly, you're not getting any younger. It's time to accept reality and make a responsible decision about your future." The neighborhood changes he referenced were actually improvements. Young families moving in, children playing in yards again, new energy and life returning to streets that had grown quiet as my generation aged. But to David, these changes meant I no longer fit, that the evolution of our community somehow disqualified me from remaining part of it. His logic suggested that aging in place was inherently inappropriate, that reaching 71 meant forfeiting the right to stay where I belonged. Carol jumped in with financial projections she'd apparently prepared without my input or consent. "Frank, we've calculated the equity in this house, and you could afford a really nice apartment in Sunset Manor with money left over for activities and travel. You'd be so much happier with people your own age." And the assumption that I'd be happier segregated by age, managed by others, and relocated against my wishes revealed how little they understood about what actually made me happy. I tried to explain one more time that I was content in my home, capable of maintaining it, and uninterested in the lifestyle changes they were proposing. My words were met with the kind of patronizing patience adults use with children who don't understand what's best for them. "Dad, you say that now, but what happens when you fall? What happens when you need help? What happens when this place becomes too much to handle?" That's when David delivered the words that changed everything between us. "You don't belong here anymore. This isn't the neighborhood you moved to. These aren't your people, and this house is more than you can realistically handle. It's time to stop being stubborn and start being practical about your limitations." The casual cruelty of dismissing my entire life as irrelevant, my home as inappropriate, and my independence as stubbornness was breathtaking in its disrespect. The silence that followed his declaration was deafening. Even Carol looked uncomfortable with how far he'd gone, though she didn't contradict him. They sat there waiting for my response, apparently expecting me to finally capitulate to their pressure campaign now that they'd made their position brutally clear. Instead, I stood up from the table where we'd shared hundreds of family meals and looked at my son with a mixture of disappointment and determination I'd never felt before. "Thank you for making your feelings so clear, David," I said quietly. "You've given me a lot to think about." They left that morning satisfied that they'd finally broken through my resistance, convinced that their ultimatum would produce the compliance they'd been seeking for months. They had no idea they'd just motivated me to prove exactly where I belonged, and it wasn't where they thought. That afternoon, I called Linda Morrison, the top real estate agent in our area, and someone I'd known professionally for years through my landscaping business. "Linda," I said, "I need to sell my house, but probably not for the reasons you're expecting. Can we meet tomorrow morning?" Her surprise was audible, but her professionalism kicked in immediately. We scheduled a meeting for Tuesday morning at Mel's Diner, the same place where David and Carol had delivered their ultimatum just 24 hours earlier. The plan that formed in my mind that evening was simple but satisfying. If David thought I didn't belong in my current home and neighborhood, I'd prove him right by moving somewhere even better. The landscaping business I'd sold 3 years earlier had been more successful than my children realized, and my investment portfolio had performed well under the careful management I'd learned from 40 years of business ownership. They'd assumed I was financially limited. They were about to learn otherwise. I spent Monday researching properties in Oakwood Heights, the most prestigious neighborhood in our city, where houses started at twice the value of my current home and went up from there. Beautiful estates with professionally designed landscapes, gourmet kitchens, master suites larger than most apartments, and all the luxury amenities that represented real success rather than managed decline. If I was going to move, I'd move up, not down to the institutional living my children envisioned. Linda's reaction when I explained my situation was a mixture of amusement and admiration. "Frank, are you telling me you want to sell this beautiful home to move to something even more spectacular, just to prove a point to your son?" When I nodded, she burst into laughter. "I love it. I have 3 properties in Oakwood Heights that would be perfect. When do you want to see them?" The financial qualification process was surprisingly smooth. My assets, carefully accumulated over decades of business success and conservative investing, exceeded what was needed for the upgrade I was planning. Linda's eyes widened when she saw the pre-approval amount, and she began showing me listings that represented not just houses, but statements of independence and capability that would reshape how my family viewed my choices and resources. By Monday evening, I'd selected the perfect property. A stunning 4-bedroom colonial with a 3-car garage, professional landscaping that put my current yard to shame, and luxury features throughout. The price was substantial, but well within my means, and the statement it would make about my resources and independence was exactly what David's ultimatum had inspired. The closing could happen within 30 days if everything went smoothly. Tuesday morning, I drove to Mel's Diner with Linda, following in her BMW, both of us ready for a conversation that would surprise my son more than anything that had happened in our relationship for decades. The breakfast meeting they thought would result in my capitulation to their pressure campaign was about to become a demonstration of resources, independence, and dignity they'd never suspected their declining father possessed. David and Carol arrived at Mel's Diner, expecting to find me alone and hopefully defeated, ready to discuss the practical details of relocating to the senior community they'd selected. Instead, they found me sitting at our usual corner booth with Linda Morrison, real estate contracts spread across the table, both of us looking remarkably cheerful for people supposedly dealing with the sad necessity of downsizing an elderly man's living situation. "Dad, what's going on here?" David asked, his confusion obvious as he recognized Linda from her prominent real estate signs throughout the city. "Why is there a realtor at our breakfast?" Carol slid into the booth beside him, her eyes scanning the official-looking documents with growing concern that this wasn't proceeding according to their carefully laid plans. "Well, son," I said, enjoying his discomfort more than I probably should have, "you made it very clear yesterday that I don't belong in my current home anymore. So I decided you were absolutely right. Linda and I have been discussing my relocation plans." The relief that began to cross David's face was premature and about to be replaced by something much more complicated. Linda, bless her professional heart, played her role perfectly. "Your father has been a pleasure to work with, David. His financial qualifications are impressive and his vision for his next home is really exciting. Frank, should we show them the listing photos?" She pulled out the glossy brochures for the Oakwood Heights property, complete with professional photography that showcased every luxurious detail of my new home. The silence at our table was profound as David and Carol processed the images of the colonial mansion, the gourmet kitchen, the master suite with spa bathroom, the professionally landscaped grounds that made their own suburban yard look modest by comparison. This wasn't the downsizing scenario they'd orchestrated. This was an upgrade that exceeded their own lifestyle by a considerable margin. "Dad, I don't understand," David stammered, his sales manager confidence completely absent. "This house, it's huge, it's expensive, how can you possibly—" He couldn't finish the question without admitting he'd never understood his father's financial situation, never bothered to learn about the business success and careful investing that had built substantial wealth over decades of hard work. Linda answered for me with professional enthusiasm. "Your father's pre-approval amount was quite impressive. He's qualified for significantly more house than this, actually. But he wanted something manageable that would still allow him to entertain family comfortably. The 3-car garage will accommodate visitors, and the guest suite is perfect for when family comes to stay." Each detail she mentioned made David's miscalculations more obvious. Carol found her voice first, though it came out as a whisper. "Frank, we had no idea you could afford something like this. We thought—" She couldn't complete the sentence because finishing it would require admitting they'd assumed their father was financially vulnerable, declining in capability, and dependent on their guidance for basic life decisions. The luxury property photos made their assumptions look foolish, and their pressure campaign seemed cruel rather than caring. The revelation of my financial capabilities and independence transformed our family dynamic in ways that are still unfolding 6 months later. The closing on my new home went smoothly, and the move itself became an opportunity to demonstrate the very competence David and Carol had questioned. Professional movers handled the furniture, but I supervised every detail, coordinated every aspect, and settled into my new home with the same efficiency I'd brought to running a successful business for 40 years. The house in Oakwood Heights exceeded even my expectations. The master suite was a sanctuary of luxury that made my morning routines feel like spa experiences. The kitchen was a chef's dream, where I could prepare elaborate meals for family gatherings that were now hosted in style rather than obligation. The home office allowed me to manage my investments and plan new adventures from a space designed for serious thinking and decision-making. David's first visit to the new house was awkward but enlightening for both of us. Walking through rooms that showcased success he'd never credited me with, examining features that represented resources he'd never suspected, he began to understand that his assumptions about my decline had been based on his own limitations of imagination rather than any real assessment of my capabilities. "Dad," he said during that first visit, "I owe you an apology. We treated you like you were helpless when you were actually more capable than we realized. This house, the way you handled everything, it's impressive. I'm sorry we underestimated you." The admission cost him something, but it also opened space for a relationship based on respect rather than condescending concern. Carol's reaction was more complex, tinged with embarrassment about the senior living brochures she'd brought to pressure me into downsizing. "Frank, I feel terrible about how we handled this situation. We thought we were helping, but we were actually being presumptuous and disrespectful." Her apology felt genuine, accompanied by a new deference to my judgment that was refreshing after months of being managed like an incompetent child. The grandchildren's response to the new house was pure delight. Ryan loved the game room with its professional pool table and entertainment center. Emma was fascinated by the luxury features and spent hours exploring every detail of her grandfather's mansion, as she called it. Their excitement reminded everyone that success and independence weren't age inappropriate, just underestimated by people who'd made assumptions based on stereotypes rather than reality. 6 months later, my life has settled into routines that combine the best of independence and family connection. I host dinner parties for neighbors, volunteer with local organizations, and travel when the spirit moves me. The landscaping business experience helps me work with the professional grounds crew, maintaining my estate-quality yard. The investment portfolio continues to grow under my management, proving that retirement doesn't mean the end of financial competence. Most importantly, my relationship with David and Carol has evolved into something healthier and more honest. They no longer make assumptions about my limitations or capabilities, and I no longer have to prove my competence through dramatic gestures. We meet for breakfast regularly, but now the conversations focus on my plans rather than their concerns, my adventures rather than their interventions. The house that love built may be gone, but the life that love created continues in new and better ways. Martha would have loved the gardens here, would have enjoyed entertaining in the spacious rooms, would have been proud of the statement this home makes about the success we built together. Sometimes being told you don't belong somewhere gives you the perfect opportunity to find where you truly deserve to be. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated by family members who thought they knew your limitations better than you did? Have you found that surprising people with your capabilities changed how they treated you forever? Share your story in the comments, because sometimes the best response to being dismissed is demonstrating exactly what people failed to see in you. And if this tale of unexpected resources and dignified independence inspired you, subscribe to Grandpa's Stories. Age isn't about accepting limitations others impose on you. It's about showing them exactly what they underestimated.